everyone, this is now part 2 of my model restoration project. Hey everyone, and welcome to another Interstellar Modeler as we continue now the restoration of this Runabout model. First of all, I'd like to just apologize for some background noise you'll hear on occasion. That's because I have the garage door open. It's kind of hot here right now. I just want to make sure I have some good ventilation going here. As you saw at the end of the video, I had a lot of the interior painted black, and that's of course to begin the process of light blocking. And for that I just used this thick craft paint here. I applied a couple coats of this, after which I applied some white primer. The white, of course, is to enhance the glow of the lights. Also was working on the impulse sections, and you can see here that I have now the intake and the hole for the exhaust port cut out. And so I'm going to set these aside here because the first thing I'd like to do in this video is start with the warp nacelles. So one common complaint with this model, particularly with the nacelles, is that they are very ill-fitting. As you can see at the front section here, even though they're hooked together here, they do not align properly. The plastic appears to vary in thickness, so we've got to address that. And so this is one here, and you can see the other one not quite as bad, but at least with the alignment, but the seams are fairly heavy. Okay, so this is how it's looking so far. I think we're off to a good start. Obviously I'm going to do more once we start to putty. It was definitely helpful to have this squared off file here for these sections. So our 4 pieces for the nacelles now are here and they're ready to be assembled. What I did was I applied our primer, which I'm using the Stynylrez Gray Primer. I then applied a gloss coat so that I could use this stuff here, and that's to darken up the panel lines. The goal there is that when we apply our base color, which is going to be light gray, those panel lines will come through a little bit better. So the next step is going to be to apply a dull coat, apply our base color, then we'll assemble the nacelles with the lights and start masking everything off around the areas where the seams need to be treated. So the lights we're going to be using for the warp engines are these strip LEDs, and essentially these come in strips like this, and you cut them at the designated areas there, and then you solder on your wires here. And the wire we're going to use here is this stuff that I got from Model Train software. So these are the LEDs I have set here for the nacelles. I just wanted to turn them on just to show you what they look like. These are blue LEDs, and I attached the wire, as you can see in the video here, by just using just a little solder, and then after which I added some shrink tubing there just to give us some support. They wouldn't be able to be pulled off so easily. And so the plan is to have our anti-collision light here on this side. The lights just went off. And we've got our running light that's going to be here. So this video sequence now will show how I attached the strip lights. The first step was to use these tweezers to bend the wires so that we can fit all this in this confined space. The next step was to determine exactly where I would want the lights permanently attached. Here you can see the adhesive backing that the LED strip comes with. And again, I did not depend on just the adhesive from the backing. I went ahead and used super glue to help secure it further into place. And when you're working with super glue, one thing that is very helpful to have is this Instaset. It's the brand name. It's an accelerator that helps the super glue dry a lot faster. And you can see as I'm going along here, just applying the Instaset right after dropping down the super glue. And here I'm using compressed air just to spread the glue around a little bit, just so I won't have big blobs of glue here and there. And this one is done. And here I have it hooked up to a battery just so you can see the effect, and I'm very pleased with the outcome here. So here are the lights we're going to be using to light up the Bussard collectors. They are 2 3mm LEDs that were tinted with Tamiya's clear red, and they're wired together so that I can have a single positive and negative wire heading out to the power supply. So I've got to give this a bit more time to dry because after placing them in these pieces of styrene that I cut out for this purpose, some of the clear red chipped off, so I had to repaint them, and this takes a little bit of time to dry. Okay, so here we have all the pieces now for the impulse engines together. I've painted the exterior with our light gray, and we've got our openings, of course, cut out for the lighting. We've got the orange pieces, which have now been tinted with Tamiya clear orange and then frosted with Tester's dull coats. And then we have this here that's been colored red. That's going to go along the backside here for the impulse engine's exhaust. So initially I had in mind to have an orange LED on this side and a red one on this side here, but I don't think that's going to give us enough illumination. So I think what we can do, and I got this hint from a guy named Richard who has a channel, Donuts in Space, and has a whole video on building his runabout in this manner, and what he ended up using was strip lighting. So what I have here is a strip of warm LEDs, and I'm going to go through the process of hooking up the wires and the shrink tubing just to show you that one more time. The plan is to go ahead and have the strip lighting placed right in the center, and hopefully that'll be enough illumination for us. Let's go ahead and test it out. So here we have one of the nacelle supports taped together, and you can see it looks like we're getting enough illumination, and I'm very pleased also with the way that netting worked out to create that texture for the front piece here. Let's take a look at the back side, and it's looking pretty good here as well. Alright guys, well the next step is to go ahead and paint the paneling here before assembling all these structures, and in order to help me out with that, I've went ahead and printed out some reference pictures as I typically do with all my builds. And so these are all pictures you can find of the studio model online. You can see these here show the model at various angles. These three here are pictures of the studio model as it was seen at auction. Now, as you compare the pictures, and this is typically the case, you'll find it's sometimes difficult to determine exactly what color to paint your model, but I always look at it that you can either try to duplicate the studio miniature, what you'd see in real life, versus what you see on screen. So the approach I'm going to take is to try to duplicate what I saw on screen, and I always thought it looked like a lighter gray shade, and that's why I chose Tester's light gray here as our base color. If you want to choose to paint it like the studio model and kind of achieve this more almond or creamier tone, I would choose camouflage gray instead. And I just wanted to share a few shots with you here of how I'm using both masking tape as well as liquid masking fluid to help out with the paneling and these different sections. So just to review a few things here before I put this all together. You can see the orange and red piece are in place now for the impulse engines. We just have to mount the strip light here. And the nacelles have been fully painted. We have the landing pads, I'm going to call them here, painted gray. The phaser arrays, I actually used a burnt umber for that. I know that might seem an unusual color, but as I was looking at this picture, and this is what I'm using as my guide, you can see they kind of are this dark brown color. So I decided just to stick with that. And as I put this together, one other thing I wanted to make note of is you'll notice there is a gap here that is created simply the way these orange pieces are mounted. Now I did try to mount it on the inside, but there just seemed to be a lot of spacing or a bigger gap between the outer piece here. So what I'm going to do to cover that gap, because most likely there's going to be some light leakage there, I'll test that before I put this together, but I think I'm going to go ahead and use a strip styrene here just to cover those areas like that. And it seems to be the proper width that I need, so I will use that. Okay, so I'm going to get all this together. Other things I need to do is just extend the wire for the running lights and the collision lights as well, so they can feed through and reach to the main body. Okay, so I'll get this together and we'll wrap everything up here in a second. So here we now have our completed nacelle supports and warp engines all together. This came with its challenges, of course, because this is not the best fitting model. A lot of gaps to fill in. One thing I always find helpful to use is this plastic putty. This comes with this needle nose applicator to allow you to get into tight spaces, so very helpful again in this particular situation. So gaps along here as well. I'm not going to completely conceal this seam only because it's really not that visible. So I'm just going to go ahead and just fill in the gaps so you don't see any major gaps there. And there was a crack that happened here, unfortunately, as I was attaching this piece, so I have to repair that. And after all this is dried, I'm just going to apply some light gray so that we can conceal the putty. So the wires are all set to go. They're all labeled, so I know which is which. And the next step now as we move into part 3, because I'm going to go ahead and end this video here, is to move on to the main hull and final assembly. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at interstellarmodeler@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in part 3. Take care.